You can say that you stand apart, put a fence around your yard. You can build a tall rampart and guard it with a gun. You can build yourself a moat, burn the bridge and burn the boat. It won't matter that much, you know, 'cause all the world is one. All the world is one, yeah. You can march in a big parade every Independence Day. You can raise up your own flag, sing your own anthem. It'll ring out in the air with all the other anthems there, till the winds of the earth declare all the world is one. All the world is one. Go and ask the Buddha when he's sitting under the tree. Go ask Walt Whitman when he's looking out at the sea. Ask Alan Shepard when he's standing up on the moon, staring at that pearl of blue. Ask an atom in the breath you take. Ask the water by the riverbank. Ask a strand of DNA, it's written in your blood. One life running in your veins, one life from one big bang. You could try and separate, but all the world is one. All the world is one. Go and ask the Buddha when he's sitting under the tree. Ask Hattie Dillard when she's up on Secure Creek. Ask Alan Shepard when he's standing up on the moon, staring at that pearl of blue. You can take an outbound train, try and make a getaway. You can ride off like John Wayne into the setting sun. But earthlings don't leave town, they just go round and round until they figure out all the world is one. All the world is one. All the world is one.
Nice. Thanks, guys. Nice. Peter Mayer, All the World is One. This morning we are thinking about this. We're finishing up this series, I'm Not That, Spiritual Refugees in Search of Home. And we're thinking in particular, as you look at your bulletin, I didn't bring mine with me. I'm going to borrow yours, if I might. Thank you very much, Tamara. If you're looking at this, this sort of, I mocked up sort of the Pew Research Survey, at least a mock of one of those kinds of things, with the different responses. Which one would you be? Spiritual, not religious, Christian? So we've kind of done all of these, but we're getting down to the last two, which is none of the above, wait a minute, no wait, all of the above. So that's what we're going to kind of wrap up this morning, thinking about what is this, who are we? When we know what we're not, perhaps, do we know who we are? But we also have some announcements. I'm going to need to borrow that again. There you go. Mine is over here, I think. I'm not sure where I set it down. So a couple of announcements, and we have a guest to come in and give us an announcement as well, just to highlight the Wine and Wishful Thinking, which we've been doing every other, like first and third. We're actually going to be doing that every Monday, so if there's for a while, we'll see how that goes. Some folks have been asking when they couldn't be there on one, they'd still like to come, so we're going to do it every Monday, and we'll just see how that goes. Have great discussion. Lots of times we're following up what we talk about Sunday morning. Other times we're just talking about what issues are going on right now in the world and thinking sort of deep thoughts theologically, spiritually, and such. So we have a good time. It's over at Winehouse on 8th and Park Hill. Thank you very much. That's actually not what I wanted, though. But I appreciate all the people trying to help out, and I appreciate that. So we have Daniel Rowe with us, who's a longtime member here of the church and wants to speak. We've got some tents that are set up out here. You might have seen him. He's going to address that.
When you came in, you probably saw the tents out front. If you came in, two more back in these entries. And what we're doing this Sunday is we are trying to... Thank you. What we're trying to do is we're trying to raise awareness and raise funds for our foreign mission trips. This church has 2 foreign mission trips that go every year. For 11 years, we have gone to Costa Rica, and for the last 6 years, we have gone to Kenya. And if you're interested in participating and going on any of these trips, keep an eye out on the bulletin. Usually in January or February, there's an announcement about an informational meeting where you can learn more about the trip. We would love to have you go on either one of them or both. But the purpose of the tents out here today is to try to raise funds to support these trips. They do 2 very different things. In Costa Rica, we actually do construction. We have built a church. We're working on a parsonage and some other buildings so that a congregation there has a place to go worship every Sunday morning. In Kenya, what we're doing is our team on the ground there has selected 250 of the neediest children in their community, and our funds allow those children to go to school. They could not go to school without a uniform. The elementary school kids, some of them can't afford them. We provide those. The high school kids, they have a bit of a tuition to pay, so we take care of that too. 250 children. That number has reduced a little bit as some of them have graduated out of the program. We're down now to about 175 kids that we're still supporting. The Costa Rica trip is going to grow a little bit this year. We're going to add a medical mission element to this. We're going to send some doctors, some nurses, some assistants down there, and we're going to do a little bit of that kind of work in the same community this summer. I mentioned that some of our Kenya students had graduated. Several of them in college. One of them is actually studying medicine. So maybe once she graduates with her degree, we can send her to Costa Rica. But what we've got out here is we have some things for sale that were actually made in Costa Rica and in Kenya. So take a look at those. We also have, see if I was really prepared doing this, I'd have this out. We have these little tags we'd like you to pick up. And what they are is, on the back, it kind of explains where your donations go and how far they can go. So pick one of these up if you do nothing else and take it with you. You can pay with a credit card here in the courtyard. You can write us a check, or you can take it with you and mail it in later. But pick one of these up. This is what supports our trips and supports our trips. Excuse me. We pay our own way on the trips. This is what supports the communities that we serve. And I've not been to Costa Rica yet. I went to Kenya on the initial trip. And working with this community or this committee and going over there, I've come to the conclusion that the world is not fair. And if it was fair, I wouldn't have all that I have. And that is really stark and evident when you go to either one of these countries, that the world's not fair. And what we're doing is we're trying to make it a little more fair. We come into this building, into this incredible facility every Sunday, and this community in Costa Rica didn't have a building. But we have built them a church where they can go and keep the sun off their head and the rain off their back every Sunday morning and visit with their friends and neighbors and worship every Sunday. When I was growing up, I had all the educational opportunities I could take, or I could take advantage of. I knew that when I was a grown-up, I could be anything I wanted to be. And if we don't continue to send money, these children don't get to go to school, and they won't have that opportunity to be anything they want to be. It is through your generosity that they have that opportunity. And I thank you for your generosity, and I thank you for your support. Please stop by when you come out and pick up a tag and help us to continue to support these communities. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
And my son and daughter-in-law have been involved in that Kenya trip for many, many years, and now they're living in Germany, but they're still sort of administrating the money that is still going over there. And it's so easy. It's so amazing to me, the stories they tell. They still keep up with everyone over there by way of Skype, and everybody has a phone. Actually, everybody has phones. They don't oftentimes have a uniform, but they have a way of communicating with one another. They often need bicycles for transportation, but they have a way of just trying to stay connected. What my son reminds me sometimes, he says, "Dad, you realize for $250 you can put a kid through 8 levels of school, a good program that will then get them either into tech school or into professional school, and like the medical school, which is the professional school." And to see that happening, so they go over every year to kind of help that. The trip's expensive, which is the downside of flying all the way to Africa, but it's such a profound experience. And if you go online and you check out the YouTubes, I know at least for the African trip, and I bet there's stuff there for the Costa Rican trip too, but if you go online and look up the Kenya trip, you get to see where each year at the end of the trip, where the village comes together and celebrates. It'll just bring tears to your eyes to see how, not just how grateful, but how they celebrate life by coming together as community. It's just a profound thing. And it's all centered around what people do for one another. So it's great. I hope you can go by and visit that. Also, we'll have a little drum circle, I think. I hope. My son's supposed to show up, my other one, and put drums out there, so we'll see. But if that's the case, then we'll definitely do some drumming. I hope you're registering your attendance, too. If you haven't done that, register your attendance. If you're visiting with us, great to have you all here. And make sure that you sign up your attendance as well so we can keep up with you and let you know what's going on. You'll bring all of that up here in just a minute. But we're going to open with some prayer. Let's stand together. And let's pray. Pray with me. Holy One, we are grateful for the ways in which we have opportunity to discover more about ourselves, more about our blessings, more that we can, maybe should be grateful for, but also ways in which we can deeply impact the world for good. For these things we give thanks for these opportunities, and also for this chance to be here today on this beautiful day, to celebrate in this room, to be together as community. We give thanks. And we pray it in the name of the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. So I'm going to invite you to come forward if you have an offering on your registration. We're going to sing this Peter Mayer song, Blue Boat Home.
Here we go. Low below me, I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my child and heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now. Never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat's home. Verse 2. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat's home. All right. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, breathe the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Everybody say yay for banjo. That's right. Take a moment, offer one another a sign of peace, if you would.
Well, good morning again. It's my pleasure to do the readings of the messages this morning. The first one is Acts chapter 17, verse 28. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we too are the God-centered. Then from Rumi's discourses, in God's presence, there is no room for two egos. You say ego, and he says ego. Either you die in his presence, or he will in your presence, so that no duality may remain. And then Mark, chapter 8, 36 through 37. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me, and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way, my way, to saving yourself, your true self. What good would it do to get everything you want and lose you, the real you? What could you ever trade your soul for?
When there's burning in your hearts and endless yearning in your hearts, build it bigger than the sun. Let it grow, let it grow. When there's a burning in your hearts, don't be alarmed. This fire grows when there's a doubt within your mind, because you're thinking all the time, framing rights and the wrongs. Move along, when there's a doubt within your mind, when there's a burning in your heart, and you think you'll burst apart. Oh, there's nothing more to feel. Save the tears, when there's a burning in your heart. And if you feel like a tourist in the city you were born, then it's time to go and define your destination. There's so many different places to call home. So when you find yourself a villain in the story you have written, it's plain to see. Sometimes the best intentions are in need of redemptions. Would you agree? If so, please show me. This fire grows high. This fire grows high. When there's a burning in your heart, when there's a burning in your heart, this fire grows. When there's a burning in your heart, this fire grows. When there's a burning in your heart, this fire grows high. This fire grows high.
Nice job. So I think it's pretty cool that we did a Death Cab for Cutie song. Did y'all know that was who that was? So you're going like, who? Some of you knew that. That's right. So I heard that. You know, Brad, we're going to have to work on this. I'll figure this out. Making a mess of stuff. So this past week, I had the chance to speak to about 2,000 5th and 6th graders in Marshall, Texas. I was just one of these things that had been scheduled for me a long time ago to go do sort of an children's author storytelling visit, and so I went out and spoke to 4 different schools throughout the whole day on Friday, and I don't know if you've been to Marshall, Texas, but these particular schools, I think, were the Title I schools, and you know, they were all sitting on the gym. You walk into the setting, and the principal is like, okay, Mr. McDermott, we're going to have them sitting at the tables. They're going to be in neat rows. We will bring them in an orderly fashion, and once they're all set, then we'll tell you you can begin. And then when they all finally get in there, and they're all marched in and sitting down, and I'm looking out there seeing what are mostly kids that I'm pretty sure are living in poverty level, if not worse. Not all, but a great majority of these kids. And I'm just thinking their lives are just so out of control for them, right? And who knows what the backgrounds of their stories are and all. And then this rigid kind of... And then she stands up in front and she says, now, I will expect every one of you to behave yourselves. You will enjoy this morning. And you will not talk. If there's any talking, and I'm looking at her thinking, you don't know what I do, lady. And she says, if there's any talking, you will be removed immediately. And I was just thankful that she didn't do what happened when I went to an at-risk school in the Fort Worth district, and the principal came out and said, if any of you don't want to be here, then you just get on up and leave now. And about a third just got up and left. I hadn't even got a chance to do anything yet. And so I was sitting there, and I walk into this setting, right? And this is the narrative. This is the story that I stepped into. This is the story that their lives are. And I think about people, as I look at people, as I look at you and you look at me, we define people so quickly, right? You know, we talk about profiling in the world and stuff. We profile each other all the time. We just make up minds without really thinking. And I look out there, and immediately a story came to mind, and that's kind of how this works sometimes. It's not always how my sermons work. I promise you I actually do prepare ahead of time, but sometimes things just come immediately because I see something, and thankfully I've had enough experience, and I look out there, and so I say, all right, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. And I apologize ahead of time because I know most of you guys are in 6th grade, but I'll say the same thing to you. I apologize to you all as well. Because you see, I hope you don't find offense in what I'm about to say, but when you turn 13, especially if you're a guy, you hit what I call the epicenter of dumb. And I saw some 6th grade guys going like, what? What are you talking about? And I said, no, okay, not all of you, maybe some of you, maybe not. But it's true, most of you guys in here would recognize that by 8th grade, by the time you turn 13, especially if you're a guy, for something just happens, the amygdala kicks in full drive, the frontal lobe turns off the light and says, I'll check with you in 20 years. And there you are, you know, you're just going to do stupid things. And my uncle was one of these individuals, and I've talked about him in here, who always had this ability to see past stupidity. You know, he always had this ability to see past what most other people would see first thing. I mean, I shared in here too, I shared the story of how I had really lost my temper, and I did a lot of really ridiculous, destructive things when I was 13. And I talked about how I went home one day after a miserable day at school and was already intent on destroying something by the time I got home. And the closer I got to home, the more time I'd had to think about it. And by the time I got to the house, I was kind of checking off things that I knew would get me into big trouble until I started to think more creatively. If I could find something to destroy that nobody could really tell I had destroyed it, that would be even better. And that's when I saw clay pots out on the back wall next to the garden. And I thought if I smashed out the bottom of the clay pots, nobody would know any better, right? I could take a hammer, just hammer them out. I could just have some fun destroying something, turn them upside down. Nobody would know until they planted something, right? The problem was that I didn't realize how angry I was. And I told the kids, I said, so I took the hammer, and when I hit the first pot, it just obliterated the thing. And that felt so good, I just went after one after another one. And nobody was home. I was free to be destructive and was going through the line down to about the 7th, 8th pot when I raised up the hammer, and my uncle, Mac, came through the kitchen door out into the backyard. And I had the hammer up in the air, staring at him like caught. He said, Tommy, what are you doing? I said, what every 8th grader would say, nothing. Because that answers everything, right? And then I put the hammer down real quick, and I started to act innocent, and he came over to me even angrier, and he says, why did you do that? And then I said the other great answer. I said, I don't know. And the fact is that my uncle had every reason to punish me. That was terrible what I was doing. But my uncle did something that I've learned that stories do, that people can do if they practice at it, that reminds us of something much bigger than who we think we are or who we think others are. My uncle did something. He looked past that. And he walked up to me with these intense eyes, and then he said something I totally didn't expect. He said, how would you like to get paid to destroy stuff? And I said, is this a trick question? And he didn't say anything else. He said, come with me. He actually helped me sweep the stuff aside, and we kind of put it in a trash can. And we went home, and we went to his laundromat. He had 2 laundromats here in Fort Worth. And my uncle gave me this job where I got to work in between the broken laundry machines. You know, they're lined up back to back in the middle with the dryers all around the outside. They have a little yellow ribbon around them. If they don't work, it says do not use or out of order, whatever. I got to crawl in between that crawl space, and then with pliers or with screwdriver or whatever, I got to tear stuff apart. My uncle had 2 boxes that he would use. One box would say useful stuff. He said if it looks intact, if it looks one piece, put it in useful stuff. He said if it comes off in pieces, put it in less useful stuff. That's what he called the other box, less useful. I said, why would you do that? Why do you call it less useful? He says, I don't throw anything away. You never know. You might need a screw or a bolt or something. He was always matching stuff up, in the most unexpected ways. So I did that job, and I had a fun time, and I got paid. And I told the kids, I said, you know what? It was the best job ever. I was just tearing things apart, getting paid. One day on the way home, my uncle says, Tom, you've earned some money. And I was thinking about the stuff I could do with that money. And he looked that same look when he looked past me the first time. He had that same look 3 weeks later. He says, what could you do with the money you've earned? Didn't even have to think about it. I knew exactly what it meant. I said, I'd go buy some more clay pots for Mom. And I looked at the kids and I said this, and you know what? I'm always amazed when a 6th grader gets it and their teachers don't. And I looked at him, and then I'm not disparaging teachers in general. Just in this, it was a really rigid and difficult school, and I understand how difficult things can be. I really do. But there's sometimes we have to even work past our own familiarity sometimes. We really have to work hard at it. And I said to the kids, I said, you know what? Sometimes, what my uncle taught me is that sometimes what we think we see isn't really what we're seeing. We just have to look past it. And it takes some patience. And it takes some curiosity. And they were just smiling. I think most of them got it. This series we've been doing has been about knowing who we are as people of faith, as Christians, and kind of looking at the trends of the world around us, especially here in the U.S. and in the Western world. And so we've been talking about how sometimes, especially in this space, where we are a very progressive, a very open-minded, a very sort of curious congregation of sorts, and been that way for 12, 13 years, where we sort of come from so many backgrounds, where we come from Catholic churches where we felt sort of excluded or felt maybe even abused in some way or other, where we've come from fundamentalist churches where we've sensed shame or we've sensed this sense of control or rigidity, any number of stories that a lot of us have ended up bringing to here. Somebody came up to me after the 939 service. They've been visiting for a few weeks, and they said, we're that refugee. We came from this evangelical Bible church that's out near Jacksboro, and they said, we're like that refugee you talked about. And that's the whole thing. I mean, that's where a lot of folks are, especially in this community. Maybe you've settled in, but then what does that mean? What does that mean? Are we sort of permanent refugees sort of looking for a home, or is there something else? Are we spiritual but not religious? I'm sure a lot of us could identify with that. That's what a lot of folks answer on those surveys now. And then, of course, my favorite was, I'm not that kind of Christian, which a lot of us can identify with, but we're not exactly sure then what kind that necessarily means. But not that kind, the one that I left, that church. And then this other one that I like especially, the none of the aboves. And the reason why I like the none of the aboves is because they're the fastest growing religion in the U.S. They're the fastest growing religion in the U.S. When you look at the surveys, those who say they became Christian or they have beliefs in God, that grew from the last 10 years about 2-3% at the most. Those that moved from one denomination to another grew about 1% to the next. Those who said they were just flat out atheists grew about 1 or 2%. But the none of the aboves in the last 10 years grew by 12% to 29%. That's from the previous 10 years to that, where it was like a growth of about 7%. So that population, the none of the aboves, it continues to grow. And the Pew Research, what they suggest is right now there's about 40%, 30% or 40% in Europe. But we know those people are all going to hell, right? I'm kidding, right? I hope everybody knew that. And anyway, but here's the interesting thing about the Europeans. They don't just have a none of the above now. There's a new category, especially in places like France and Netherlands and Britain and Germany, that's this new category, and I can't pronounce it because it's a Dutch name, but it looks kind of like Ethniscomlester, but that's, literally, look it up. It's a new religious category, and it literally translates as somethings. They're the somethingists. It was like, we don't know what we believe in something. I mean, literally, that's the answer. We're not really sure there's something there, but we're just not real sure. But we believe there's something. And it's the fastest growing there in Europe. In the United States, about 29% of the nuns. And the primary reason, this is what's interesting, the primary reason, because I would have said, knowing who a lot of us are and having had a chance to visit with you all over the years and get to know you, I would have said a lot of it had to do with this brokenness, with this sense of, you know what, I just got frustrated, I got tired, I got angry, whatever, they were rude, any number of things. The primary reason for the none of the aboves is because they just don't believe in the beliefs. They just can't abide by the belief system. It's the creeds, it's the beliefs. It just doesn't make sense. They're not coming to church. They've never come to church. A lot of them didn't ever grow up and go to church. They're in their 20s, their 30s. The beliefs don't make sense. That's what they put down. So they don't even darken the doors because it basically is obsolete to them. Wow. You people are obsolete. Doesn't that feel funny? Not really? Well, you're going like, yeah, I've been that way for a long time now. The older I get, the more obsolete I get. But the thing that's curious about this is that some of them, the 70% of them, still say they believe in something. Some reality, some force, something beyond who we are as individuals, but they just don't know what that is. And I want to share with you pretty quickly here a couple of things that I encountered this week that enlightened me a little bit. The first, of course, being my experience with those sixth graders that I hadn't expected that story to be used, nor the response that I got afterwards. Incidentally, by the way, they told me this was going to be a rough crowd, you know. They said, we have to be strict like that because they get out of hand real fast. Maybe it was that story. Maybe it was something else. But the 400 kids, each time I saw them, it just was wonderful. We had the best time all together. There's something about paying attention to one another. And I don't claim to have a grip on it. In fact, I claim to be pretty lousy at it, but maybe that's the starting point, is to recognize that. So on the way, or like 2 days before I left, the first thing that I encountered was I was online, and I just picked up this book earlier this week called The Great Spiritual Migration by Brian McLaren. Some of you guys know Brian McLaren, progressive, emergent Christian writer. He's written 10 books, was an evangelical fundamentalist for a number of years, part of one of these fellowship, gateway kinds of churches. And then he had basically broken away from that. He just felt like he was no longer could identify. He talks about an experience that he had that sort of opened his mind. But he started writing books, The New Christianity, 10 things that Christianity needs to ask itself if it's going to survive. He wrote another book, Why Did Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses Cross the Road? That was one he wrote a few years ago. My wife Linda's doing a study here with a group on that. And then his most recent one, The Spiritual Migration, which is The Great Spiritual Migration, How the World's Largest Religion is Seeking a Better Way to Become Christian. And as I was browsing around on Facebook, I saw this thing that said Brian McLaren's going to be in Dallas the next day. So Wednesday, I went over to see Brian McLaren. There was about 30 of us on an afternoon workshop. Just 30 of us. Apparently the word didn't get out, or he didn't want a large group. But it was fascinating to be with him because he was running through a lot of these same sort of things, but he said one thing that he's discovered is that after all of these years of his life of moving through this progression of doubting, rethinking, how can Christianity continue to survive? He said that he's come to realize that the way we think about creeds and beliefs is wrong, is confused. But more than that, what he says is that it calls, he says there's a need for us in the church to take this more seriously. He literally said to us, those 35 of us gathered, you need to walk out. And then he said, okay, I know you're not going to do that, but that's what you need to do. So what's the next thing you can do? It was pretty impacting to just sit and listen to him for a while. He truly believes that in 50 to 100 years, Christianity is not going to look anything like it does now. He's pretty convinced the church won't look anything like it does now. Certainly not in the next 100 years. What will it look like? What will we be thinking by that point when we're into nanotechnology and science has taught us all sorts of other things? What will Christianity start looking like? Christianity itself won't die. God's not going to die. God's not going away. But what will it look like? And what will the church look like? And can the church survive it? And so after he'd finished talking about all these things, somebody asked this question, which I thought was interesting. They said, Brian, are we not supposed to believe in anything? So the second thing that I experienced was on the drive to Marshall. I got on my phone and I pulled up my NPR player, and I started listening to On Being. Last week's interview on On Being was Alain de Botton, or Botton, however you say his name, Alain de Botton. He's a thinker, philosopher, a writer who's written a number of books on the process of thinking, on the art of thinking, on love and relationships, on education. He's a British writer. He's also an avowed atheist, and Krista Tippett was interviewing him about his book that he wrote 2 years ago, Religion for Atheists. And she said, why would you write a book called Religion for Atheists? And what he said was interesting to me. And of course, the interview is fascinating. You should just listen to it anyway. He's a really interesting thinker. But he said, what people don't get is that the most boring and useless question, unhelpful question that you can ask of a religion is if it's true. I'll say it again. The most boring and useless question that you can ask of a religion is if it's true. And he said, and it's the same thing for an atheist who's determined it's not. The most boring, useless question is to try to say it's not and get caught up in that. He said because it stops right there. Because the dialogue, the discussion, the growth, everything becomes static and nothing is gained. He says, I want religion because I like the way in which, if it's good religion, if it's done well, it causes me to ask higher questions. It causes me to ask questions about humanity. It causes me to ask questions about my relationship with others. And then he made the second interesting point that really sort of fit in with all of my experiences this week. And he said, you know what atheists long for. And Krista was like, to prove God doesn't exist? And she said, exactly not. I mean, that's what everybody sort of figures on. That's where they get locked up. He said, they want community. They long for community. We're living in a world with less and less of community. It can only happen in small pockets every now and then, or if you're lucky, it may happen through a church group. That's what church can offer us, he said, in so many ways, is how to do community, as long as they too don't get caught up in that rigidity that divides community as opposed to opens up community. But that's what all of them long for, is this sense of community. So his book about religion for atheists actually is interesting because he's encouraging people to go to church. He's encouraging people to get involved in religious events. The writer Robert Fulghum and my father-in-law share something in common. They both have pictures of this guy that is like a hero to them. They have pictures. My father-in-law is now deceased, but he used to have a picture on his refrigerator. Roger Fulghum talks about keeping pictures of him on his wall at his studio where he writes. And the pictures are like in stages. My father-in-law had several different ones, but one of the ones that my father-in-law had was he was wearing a set of overalls. He was wearing overalls and a stained shirt, and he had a hammer and a tool belt and nail apron, and he was on a scaffold. He's probably 40-something years old, and sweaty baseball cap, and he's putting up the side of a house. But then in the next picture, you'd see a picture of a guy who's wearing short-sleeve white shirt with a tie, and he's kind of covered in sweat again. But this time he's smiling and laughing, and he's surrounded by several folks of Latino descent. It's not clear from the picture. They're probably in Central America, but they're all laughing and smiling too, and they're celebrating something, and it's a black and white newspaper kind of picture. And then my father had this other one that was one of his favorite pictures. It was a picture of this guy wearing a suit and a tie, not smiling, between two other guys, one wearing sort of what looked like a turban-like headdress, and the other one was wearing a yarmulke, and they were both dressed to the nines, and they were all sitting around the table with this guy right there in between them, and nobody was smiling. And of course, it was Jimmy Carter. And my father-in-law was a die-hard, dyed-in-the-wool Republican. Voted for Reagan, voted for Ford, didn't vote for Carter. But he said, if I'd known who Carter was before he became president, I would have voted for him because he is the best human being I had ever met. because this was all happening after Carter was president. When he went down to Central America to broker democracy down there, when he went over to Israel to try to broker a peace agreement as an ex-president, when he started up working and basically really fired up the whole Habitat for Humanity. To this very day, Carter in his 90s is a true human being. But it's not just him, because we see people like that all the time. People who live out their faith without worrying about their beliefs. And if you sat down and you asked Carter, when they've seen him asked in interviews, he will step aside of that. He'll look past that, because he'll say that's not the issue, because that's where we get divided. I just watch all the places where he's been, how easily it is to be divided over things. Where do we not get divided? We avoid division when we seek connection. When we intentionally look past things. That's what we have to do. Yesterday at the Pride Parade, one of my friends who's over at First Arlington, I wanted to be there, but I was doing a funeral here. But she was calling everybody she knows within the Central Texas Conference to be part of the parade. And her name's Megan Hale, and she just is a triumphant young adult. She's just defiant. She goes out there, and in spite of this being a little more conservative conference here, she's still that clarion voice for equality and for inclusiveness. And I think of other folks that are like that. The guy that stood up in Tiananmen Square to the tanks. Julia Butterfly, I forget her last name, Hill, who slept in the trees up in the forests up in Washington, because she didn't want this ancient tree chopped down that had been a part of this forest. They're connected together, these trees up there in the redwood forest. And she slept in it for 738 days. She stayed into that tree till they finally came up with an agreement. I think about these people who see past things because they believe in a deeper connection. It's possible. That's what actually calls us together. That's what actually brings us together, is that openness to look past. Well, I'll finish up with a little story. A friend of mine told me this story. I don't know if it happened to him. He was a professor, but he said once he was working on a piece of work for school studies, or maybe he was doing tests, but he was really busy that night. And his daughter, who was a precocious young lady, she was 4 at the time, and she kept pestering him. And with kids, they demand a lot of our time. Oh, by the way, do we have DeAndrea here? Yes. Yeah, we'll bring DeAndrea up in a minute. But, kids, they require a lot of our time, and so she kept asking for Dad to play with her. My friend said no. He finally said, I just had to get her off onto something else. So he said he took a piece of paper from a magazine. It was a picture of the earth. This beautiful picture, tore it up into a bunch of pieces, put it in a basket, said, go put it back together. When you get it back together, come visit me. She had it done in 3 minutes or 4 minutes. He was stunned. He said she brought it in there, and there it was, the earth back together perfectly. He said, how in the world did you do that? She turned it over. She said, it was easy. There's 2 people on the back. All I had to do was put the people together. I don't know. My friends, told me this story, but I think if we could realize that the most important thing we can do in the world is whatever it takes to create connection, whatever it takes to create community. If we could get before Christianity to Jesus, before the codified creeds, before before Constantine and Constantinople, before all of the canonization and all the power struggles, if we could get before that to the Jesus of the Gospels, whose life was about connection, who did all the wrong things because it was about connection, who worked with all the wrong people and ate with all the wrong people and supped with all the wrong people because it was about connection. If we could get to that, then maybe actually Christianity will survive. Then maybe actually something even better, as Brian McLaren would say, will exist for us. DeAndrea, come on up, would you please, and help out here? So we're going to have this meal together because we do communion in here, but today we're moving back before creeds. We're moving back before all these things began to get written down and codified into rituals. We're moving back to the simple act of what it means to share life with one another, what it means to share bread with one another, what it means to share community. And so we want you to come forward, to feel welcome to come forward. That the bread is a symbol for us, as much a symbol of anything as a symbol of being broken, but it's a symbol of life. It's a symbol of sustenance. How are you life to someone else? How is that possible? How are we not life to others? What do we do sometimes that we fail to look past what's going on? And the cup, of course, is a symbol of love. So we invite you to come forward. DeAndrea is going to hold one basket of bread and cup. And I'm going to, are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. By the way, DeAndrea just had a baby. And we celebrate Mara, is she in the back still? Oh, they're doing a walk. Okay, yeah. So we celebrate Mara, and we celebrate with Aaron, her husband, and with Maisie, their other daughter, of little Mara being born. It's really exciting. And you all that know her story, it's even more exciting. So it's so good to have that and have you here and have your family here. We invite you to come forward. We're going to sing Come Thou Fount if you're sitting. If you're standing, feel free to sing that as well. But come on forward and then go back to your seat, and we'll listen to the band finish up with a song. Come forward as we celebrate community. Bread of life, the cup of love. Bread of life and the cup of love. The bread of life and a cup of love. Bread of life. Oh, I'm sorry. Bread of life and a cup of love. Bread of life, cup of love. Bread of life, cup of love. Bread of life, cup of love. Blessings. Listen, bread of life and the cup of love. 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 Bread of life and a cup of love for you. Bread of life and a cup of love.
I move on.
So I'm going to invite you all to stand, and we're going to have a blessing, but you're going to want to stick around, and you might even want to hold hands. You might even find yourself wanting to dance. Kids are certainly welcome to dance. We always encourage families dancing. This song, I heard this at Stephen Colbert about a couple of weeks ago, and it was the OJs. And they were singing, and I thought, wow, they're still alive. But when they sang this song, I thought, this song is really okay, it's corny, I understand that, but it's really kind of what we're all about, you know. We're all about this idea of creating this sort of love train. Let's have a blessing, though, before we hear the band. And hope you all will be back next Sunday. Let's take one another's hands. We'll have a blessing. Holy One, as we leave this place, remind us that we are all about this sense of holy community, that we are all about this sense of being broken for one another, of looking past the beliefs or the creeds or whatever divides us, whatever's there to sort of tell us we might be wrong, we might need something. Help us look past that we might find connection. And when we find connection, that we might see the healing that takes place and the possibilities that take place. Bless us as emissaries of connection and community. We pray this in the name of the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Amen. So, band, hit it. Let's hear some Love Train.
People all over the world join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world join hands, start a love train, love train. The next stop that we make will really land.
Go Debbie, go Debbie.
It's how the folks to rush and China tea. Don't you know that it's time to get on board and help this train keep on riding, riding on through. All over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. All of your brothers, in every crowd. Tie on the folks in Egypt and Israel too. Please don't miss this train. I just Asia. 'Cause if you miss it, I feel sorry, sorry for you. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. Ride, let it ride, let it ride, let it ride. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. People all over the world, join hands, start a love train, love train. Don't you wanna ride this love train? She pretty much got to the station.